Having to look for a new gig at 25, that feels like opportunity. But having to look for a new gig when you're 55, that feels like crap. And yet, more and more of us are being quietly pushed into that kind of reset. And so here's the timeline of it. You put about, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, right? You gave them what feels like your life. And you made a lot of sacrifices that you didn't plan for, you didn't ask for. You missed dinners and late nights at the computer, the mental weight that you carry home every single day. Man, I remember walking the sidelines at my daughter's soccer games, getting tuned up by my boss. And then after all that, they hand you this banker's box and show you the door. And you start thinking, so now what? How much severance did I get? Do I have enough savings to work off of? How am I going to tell my family? I had gotten this new job at 36 years old and I put 10 years into it, and then the company was sold and I was out. It was 2008. The economy was having a moment and I hadn't written a resume in 25 years. I had no idea what LinkedIn was. I was a decent six-figure guy, but no college education, and I'm going up against these people who were decades younger than me, and they had better credentials. For the first time in my professional life, nobody was calling. And I thought to myself, then maybe I can get this situation to work for me. And I concluded that they may have eliminated my role, but they didn't extinguish my purpose. And somewhere along the way, I stopped looking at the company that let me go with resentment, and I started looking at them through the lens of curiosity. Because their success wasn't magic, and I was a part of it. It wasn't luck, it wasn't hope, it was this strategic way of thinking and a sequence that they followed over and over again. And then one night, it hit me. If a group of people could build something meaningful from a warehouse floor, then a man can recreate himself from wherever he happens to be standing in whatever situation exists. That was the moment I stopped waiting for permission to matter. Listen to me. Starting over isn't punishment. It's redirection. A company can stop needing your skills. A role can become obsolete, but that doesn't mean the man becomes obsolete. In fact, looking back now, I'm sure that while I was being pushed out, I was also being pushed forward. And that maybe I was bringing redirection into my life, and that God was asking for a version of myself that comfort would never have allowed for. Strangely enough, that realization brought a sense of relief, and I was able to move forward. So I started writing down questions at the top of a blank page, and I wrote things like, how do I create from scratch? Now, I wasn't interested in necessarily building a system. I wanted to recreate the man that I was, from my thinking to my habits to my purpose and desires. Because the worst thing that ever happened to my career quietly became one of the best things that ever happened to me. The end of that chapter was an introduction to a way of thinking, helping me move forward with a new sense of purpose. So now the clock is ticking, and if I was going to rebuild my life, I needed to stop lamenting and start developing a personal structure. I took this word scratch and I began assigning meaning to each of the letters. Just simple anchors that would help me regain clarity and discipline and forward motion. So here's what worked for me. First, I took the S, so the S became self-worth. Because before you can build anything externally, you have to remember why you matter internally. Now, I use the word commitment for the C in scratch. I think real change begins the moment you decide you're no longer negotiating with your own potential. The R turned into rituals, routines, repetitions. I had done a lot of work with standard operating procedures, and I realized how routines become momentum from the things that you do consistently. Awareness became the A word. Now, it's real difficult to maintain direction if you don't know where you're planning on going. T was easy. T was training. You've got to lean into what it is that you want to become and start to think about what you need to know and what skills you need to develop. The second C stood for connections. And what kept rolling through my head was what my mother used to say, which was, don't be dismissive about the people that happen to be in your life at any given moment. And then the H, happiness. Because I had been living false happiness up to that point. Happiness that was based on achievement and accomplishment and accolades. But now I wanted to have happiness from alignment. And let me tell you something. Starting over isn't the end of a man's story. Sometimes it's just the chapter where he finally becomes who he was meant to be.